He is a war criminal, which is what he is. He's one of the worst war criminals in our time. What the UAE did in Sudan is the largest gold heist in history. In history, there's been no larger gold heist than has happened in Sudan. If Sudanese diaspora effectively mobilized in the US, where the weapons are coming from, this could stop. We could stop this. If there was just an ounce of the kind of mobilization that we saw for Palestine within the US for Sudan, if we mobilized and did a concerted campaigns to stop the weapons flow, to stop US complicity in Sudan, because that is what's at the foundation. That's the only reason this is continuing, is because of US complicity, because of US support, either indirectly or directly. This would stop.
Peace and blessings, everybody. I am your brother Orina, all the way from the motherland, all the way from Kenya, Nairobi, nation's capital. Welcome to Sell Africa to Africans, the home of Pan-Africanism. Well, today we have a special guest. She's not new. She's a friend of the show. You've seen her in very many social media spaces, very many shows, in very many videos advocating for Sudan. Peace in Sudan, freeing Sudan, the world's worst humanitarian crisis. And she has all the information. She's going to tell us a bit of the updates that are going on, whether the war is getting worse or better. And also the real question, which is who is behind this war and why are they behind this war? She's going to tell us every single bit of those information that we need, that we need right now. So guys, please welcome Suad Abdel Aziz of Decolonize Sudan. Suad, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. You're a friend of the show. You, Ahmed, are people who I really run to when it comes to these Sudan issues, because I really have a passion for African people, and you can't say that you're a Pan-Africanist and you're not shedding light on what's going on in Sudan, which is the world's worst humanitarian crisis. So that's why I'm really adamant in pushing peace in Sudan and pushing awareness of what's going on in Sudan right now. But Suad, let's dive into it. What are the updates? I saw the Al Sadarat highway between El Obeid and Khartoum was recaptured by the Sudan Armed Forces from the RSF. There are many recaptures that have happened. There are also many deflections that have happened, and also Hemeti was charged with a death sentence. I saw that. So, what are some of the updates, and is the war getting worse or better in terms of SAF getting back the country from the RSF?
Yeah, so just to break down, Al Obeid is, you spoke about the highway leading to Al Obeid. Al Obeid is a city it's the capital of North Kordofan, which is in the west of Sudan. And again, as we know from, as I kind of broke down in previous sessions with your audience, the RSF's current objective is annexation of the west of Sudan, which includes Darfur, which includes North and South Kordofan, which includes the Nuba Mountains. And so now that they have gone in and massacred the entirety of the civilian population of Darfur's capital, Al-Fashir, they have now moved, as they told us they would. The RSF has made very clear what their military strategy would be. They would go in and blockade and take over the capital of Darfur in order to have a stronghold on Darfur, and they would do this by massacring the civilian population and occupying the region. And then they would go on to, as they got away with it, nothing, there were condemnations of what happened. There were some light condemnations by the UN. Of course, the same empty rhetoric from the West, from the UK, and from the US about condemning what happened, but they got away with it. No real consequences for one of the largest massacres of civilians in modern history. And so now they're set to do it again in Al Ubaid, and they have been blockading Al Ubaid, have attempted to create a blockade around Al Ubaid to encircle, to capture the civilian population that remains trapped within Al Ubaid. And they've done this through drone strikes to knock out the major hospitals in Al Ubaid, the water sources of Al Ubaid, the power sources. So these 500,000 civilians within Al Ubaid are now starving with very little resources, and this is the RSF's military strategy, to starve out in the lead up to a total seizure and massacre of the civilian population of Al Ubaid. We know that this is going to happen. The UN knows that that the RSF is planning for this to happen. They've put out their same empty condemnations of stopping this without actually naming actors and enforcing any real consequences. And the US has done its same empty dance. So the only thing materially stopping the RSF has been the Sudanese military, which has now, as you mentioned, as of 2 weeks ago, the Sudanese military has now reopened the key highway linking Al Ubaid to the central Sudan. And the RSF responded with a fresh round of drone strikes, killing many civilians. So due to the Sudanese military retaking this highway linking Al Ubaid, there is now not a total blockade of Al Ubaid. And now, so there's not a clean encirclement of the city. And so now the civilians are under bombardment, are under siege by the RSF, but are not under total blockade. There's some resources able to get in and out, and God willing that this the military will be able to retake Al Ubaid and ensure that the civilian population is not massacred by the RSF. So this is what's some updates within the past month or so. Like you mentioned, Hameti was tried in absentia, which is without his presence in court within a Sudanese court for genocide, for his crimes against humanity, and for his genocidal acts against civilians. And of course, this is and he was then sentenced to death within the Sudanese court. Of course, this is symbolic. This is the Sudanese government asserting that Hameti is not a government official, is not a legitimate head of a government. He is a war criminal, which is what he is. He's one of the worst war criminals in our time. I would say one of the worst in history, according to the scale, the sheer scale of the crimes, the horrendous crimes that he has committed against Sudanese people. And so that's kind of what has happened within the past month. But again, it's symbolic because Hameti is not in the custody of the Sudanese government. And so this is largely a symbolic act of recognizing him as a war criminal.
Well, what about the RSF militias defecting and shipping, like jumping ship to the south? What do you think about that?
Yeah, there have been some, strategic, because what the military is, what the military strategy has been is to either retake RSF controlled areas or to have foster defection from the RSF in order to be able to retake RSF controlled regions, and so that's been the military strategy.
Okay. Any other updates that people need to know? I think my question before we go to the main topic is it getting worse or is it getting better? I think that's what many people want to know, because whenever we see the news, we see negative stuff about Sudan. We see a country that is far away from having hope to end the war. That's what we see. That's what the media presents to us, a country that has no hope. Is there hope that this war is coming to an end soon, if not very soon?
I mean, God willing. Again, I'm not a military strategist, so I don't know. I can make these assertions. I can only say that that God willing, the RSF will that the only armed resistance against the RSF will prevail. That the RSF will not be able to continue to lay siege on, occupy, and massacre Sudanese civilians, and the areas that are within RSF control, the civilians within would tell you that things are only getting worse. There's these civilians have not only faced massacres, but the living civilians within these regions are facing starvation. They're facing a total blockade to resources that them, and so it depends on who you ask and where they are, but yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. And I guess with recent to me, the international responses to Sudan are indicating that the RSF is going to continue to be able to do this, to take over much of Sudan, maybe all of Sudan, with impunity, to be able to continue to annihilate Sudanese civilians, and not only be able to get away with this, but actually have support from the international community in doing this.
Yeah. Let's move to the main topic, which is who's behind this war. In every African war, in every African conflict, trust me, there is somebody behind it. There is somebody in the West or the East, it depends, but there's somebody always behind our conflicts. There's somebody always fueling our conflicts for their evil, selfish interests. Who's behind this Sudan war? We know the UAE is definitely behind this, but who else is behind this, and why and how?
Yeah, I mean, we can say very clearly now that not only is this actor in the East, the UAE, involved, but the West is clearly involved. Very at the center of it is the United States, which the UAE, again, we must understand that the UAE is a client state of the US. That this is not a this is not an actor that does anything without the approval of, without the support of its larger empire that it is acting at the behest of in the Middle East and in Africa. And so the U.S. So we understand the UAE's what the UAE is doing. The RSF is a proxy militia of the UAE in every sense.
Yes.
It's the fighters, the arms, all of the resources, the military bases. They're all coming from the UAE, and the U.S. we know that the U.S. is the main provider of arms to the UAE, because the UAE doesn't manufacture its own arms. Most of these arms are manufactured here in the U.S. And are transferred to the UAE via both the sale of weapons that U.S. military U.S. weapons manufacturing companies have profited obscene amounts of profit from since the beginning of this genocide, but also from just giving the UAE weapons through military aid. The U.S. is the largest provider of military aid to the UAE. And again, it's doing this with U.S. intelligence that confirms the UAE's role in Sudan, what the UAE is doing in Sudan. So we know this already. The U.S. is complicit indirectly via its UAE ally, its UAE client state, its UAE partner, whatever you want to call it. But the U.S. Within the past month, we have now learned that the U.S. is much more directly involved than we knew it to be. A recent Reuters investigation has revealed that multiple U.S. military contractors are involved in directly supplying the RSF. Specifically, Reuters tracked American Boeing military planes tied to U.S. contractors, including Stephen Shawless, who is this U.S. Special Forces commander, and his many other U.S. Special Forces guys have been working with him within these companies. These American Boeing military planes have been flying between RSF supply hubs and dropping off foreign mercenaries, many Colombian mercenaries that were brought in via the UAE, are dropping off drones, are dropping off weapons into RSF bases. And these RSF supply hubs include the in N'Djamena base in Chad, Niala in Darfur, which is now the RSF's main military logistics hub in Darfur. And these American Boeing military planes, they were dropping off these fighters, these drones, and these weapons at Niala weeks after the RSF strikes on Niala, weeks before the RSF strikes on Niala, and after the RSF takeover of Niala. And these were two different American Boeing military planes run by and owned by U.S. contractors. And then in two other RSF bases, including in Kufra in Libya. And so going through the UAE base in Libya, the UAE military base in Libya, to pick up cargo, which includes, again, fighters, drones, weapons, and dropping them off within Sudan. They did 3 different runs to Kufra leading up to the Al-Fashir massacre. And so we have evidence that U.S. contractors directly supplied the fighters, the weapons, the drones that made the Al-Fashir massacre possible. And then to through the UAE base in Somalia, in Basaso. And using satellite imagery, using flight records, using geolocation analysis, Reuters was able to track all of these American military planes, where they went out of, where they went into to supply the RSF. One of these planes, Boeing 737, was destroyed by the Sudanese army at Niala in May of 2025. And it was found within this plane, 51 of there were 54 people in this plane. 51 of them were RSF mercenary fighters, and the crew was all employees of the U.S. Military contractor company. Days ago, a UN panel of experts on Sudan, it's the main UN body that's monitoring the Darfur arms embargo. So if you didn't know, the UN has an arms embargo on Darfur. It found this UN panel of experts confirmed all of the Reuters investigations. It found multiple American aircrafts flying the Chad-Niala corridor, carrying RSF fighters, carrying drones, and carrying weapons into RSF bases. And they also added to the list of US military companies. So it's not only these Stephen Shawless companies, the main companies, I just want to name them. There's Central Asia Development Group, which is a US based military contractor that has received $500,000 in US taxpayer dollars. And there's Occidental Support Services, which is a Shawless-owned company registered in the UAE with US incorporation. There's Contractor Airways, which is a different company owned by Craig Monroe, who is another former US Special Forces guy. This Contractor Airways was named. Kalita Charters, which is another US military contractor, was named as a Michigan-based cargo operator of 3 of the Boeing 727s, including one found in Kufra. And so we now have ample evidence from independent investigative sources, from UN experts and in a formal UN body, investigative body, that the US is directly involved in supplying the RSF. And this is not recent. So these aren't updates. This didn't happen recently. This has been happening since early 2024. So the US had these US military contractors directly supplying the RSF with fighters, with weapons, with drones since early 2024. And this is what we know. It's every day. There are new companies coming out every day. There's new information about the US military contractors' direct supplying of the RSF coming out. So this is confirming what we all, likely understand, is that the US it's much more than complicit here. It is directly involved in support of the RSF, and it's been doing so since early. We have evidence that it's been doing so since early 2024. And this was in the same moment that the US was selling these peace talks in Sudan. So can you imagine? The US was saying, Sudanese military, RSF, we just want peace. You have to make peace, whilst they were directly supplying the RSF. So this is confirming, and it is contradicting the US's narrative around Sudan, which is that it's merely a peacekeeper. It's merely here as a mediator. When we understand that it is in direct support of the RSF militia. One could say, well, the U.S. doesn't, maybe hasn't been monitoring these U.S. military contractors, so the U.S. government is not directly implicated here. It's military contractors. The U.S. So these military contractors, which I've just named 6 of them, who have received billions of dollars in U.S. taxpayer money, who are all of these U.S. Special Forces guys. You mean to tell me that the U.S. doesn't have knowledge of these military contractors working in Sudan? And I don't have to tell you that the laws all of the laws that the U.S. government is violating, indirectly supplying the RSF. There's complicity in genocide. There is the violation of the UN arms embargo on Darfur. This is in direct violation of all of the treaties that the U.S. has signed on to, all of the arms treaties, international arms treaties that the U.S. is signed on to. And it's also in violation of the U.S.'s own federal laws and policies. For example, this was happening whilst the U.S. is formally sanctioning the RSF. Because remember, the U.S. did this PR stunt where they said they were sanctioning both sides. They were going to sanction the Sudanese military and the RSF. And we understand that U.S. sanctions against the RSF are a joke. For example, the second in command of the RSF, who is Hemeti's brother, was hosted here in Washington, D.C. I was one of those who were Sudanese people who were out protesting his presence in D.C. And this is individuals who are directly sanctioned by the U.S. government. And we can only imagine that the U.S. government would not host Sudanese military officials whilst they are being sanctioned. So if the U.S. is telling us that it's sanctioning the RSF, if the U.S. is telling us that the RSF is committing genocide, these military contractors are in direct violation of their own of U.S. sanctions. But we understand that the U.S. has done nothing about and will do nothing about these U.S. military contractors ties to the RSF. But you know what sanctions that they are enforcing? They're currently surveilling Americans around in regards to Sudan, not any ties to the RSF, but to ties to the Sudanese government and the Sudanese military. Because since the U.S. sanctions on the Sudanese military, they have expanded them to include larger unilateral sanctions on the Sudanese government. The U.S. recently charged an Iranian-American woman in California with terrorism-related charges for contact with official official Sudanese government channels. So this woman was going through official channels to contact, to be in diplomatic contact with the Sudanese government, and she is currently in custody, arrested, and imprisoned, and facing sentencing for contact with the Sudanese government. So the U.S. is selectively enforcing these sanctions that they claim to be sanctioning both sides. They are selectively enforcing them on any ties to the Sudanese government, which should really worry a lot of U.S.-based Sudanese diaspora organizers. If there is at all any ties with Sudanese government channels, the U.S. has indicated that it will enforce terrorism and sanctions laws against Americans with any such ties, which has hindered humanitarian aid, which you can only imagine. Any humanitarian organization working from within the U.S. to provide humanitarian aid to Sudan has been directly affected by these U.S. sanctions. And what are these U.S. sanctions? We're hearing what are these U.S. sanctions based off of? I think that's something to interrogate. So the U.S. is sanctioning Sudan based on the justification that the Sudanese government allegedly used chemical weapons in 2024 during one of their during the Sudanese military offensive on the RSF. The U.S. did this, sanctioned Sudan using this justification without providing any dates of when such chemical weapons attack happened, any of the locations where this happened. They didn't provide any intelligence or investigation on this conclusion of chemical weapons, and they didn't provide it, and they haven't to date provided any forensic evidence or any evidence underlying this chemical weapons allegation. The U.S. is stating that this determination is based on classified intelligence. So the U.S. is hindering humanitarian aid. It is destabilizing Sudan's already fragile economy, which is fragile due to a genocide that the U.S. itself is supplying, and it is doing so at the direct harm of Sudanese civilians, because we understand that sanctions are a form of economic warfare that affects civilians first. The humanitarian groups that we work with have let us know that they're seeing the effects of this firsthand and directly, and many of their donors are pulling funding for life-saving aid due to risks around sanctions. That's why many of these groups are having to do all of this grassroots funding lately, because the U.S. government has expanded their sanctions on Sudan. So the U.S. is starving out Sudanese civilians based on these allegations of human rights violations of chemical weapons, based on this concern that the U.S. has with that human rights are being violated in regards to chemical weapons, which is rich coming from the U.S. This country, of all countries that don't respect human rights in regards to chemical weapons, it is this country, the only country to ever launch a nuclear bomb, eradicating the civilian populations of the most populated cities in Japan, the only country to kill generations of Vietnamese civilians with Agent Orange, the country that used white phosphorus on the civilian masses of Iraq and Afghanistan, the country that recently used lethal amounts of oleoresin capsicum agent or OC spray on Gaza's captive population at aid distribution sites via its military contractors. And the country currently waging domestic warfare on its own population, with the National Guard launching riot control chemicals indiscriminately on civilian protesters. These are all violations of chemical weapons treaties, including the Chemical Weapons Convention. But and the U.S. formerly possessed the world's largest chemical weapons stockpile, and only recently, as recently as 2023, did the U.S. Promise that it got rid of these stockpiles. And so, for the U.S. To wage these allegations baselessly, we understand the hypocrisy, but we also understand that the U.S. will get away with this, like it did in 9/11, immediately post 9/11, when it did the same to Iraq. It stated that these weapons of mass destruction were being hidden and utilized, and could be utilized on the U.S. at any point, and so it needs to sanction Iraq. It needs to go in there and militarily intervene. So we understand the story and how it plays out. So it's really rich that this country of all countries is concerned by the usage of chemical weapons in warfare, and we also must assert that this allegation is completely baseless, that these sanctions they're only using this as a justification of destabilizing Sudan's economy.
Wow. I guess the question is why? Why is the US doing this?
One thing to point out about is the expansion, the where the U.S. is headed around the entirety of the African continent. The U.S. is expanding AFRICOM. AFRICOM is the United States African Command. That's the U.S.'s military presence and bases in the African continent. The purpose of AFRICOM is to impose U.S. control on African land, on African resources and African labor, in order to service the needs of U.S. corporations and of the ultra wealthy in the United States. So this is not out of line with current U.S. policy on Africa and the impending policies that we will be seeing in the next year around Africa. I think Africans really need to wake up to U.S. presence in Africa because it is going to expand. The White House recently expanded they requested an expansion of their 2027 Pentagon budget that sets a record for how much they're requesting for AFRICOM. They're requesting the total amount of the request is $1 trillion. So they're drastically increasing their budget for AFRICOM. What does that mean? They hope to increase U.S. military presence in within Africa. Of course, we know that the Horn, that they're currently bombing the Horn of Africa. As we speak, they're bombing. The U.S. is bombing Somalia, but they're also expanding military operations against the Sahel. Trump recently put out this statement that claimed that the group, the GNIM, he's saying there's Al Qaeda and there's ISIS all over the Sahel, and that this presents imminent threat to the U.S. Even though the JNIM, which the U.S. itself armed these Al Qaeda factions, by the way, even though the JNIM only has ever killed Africans, and this group has never targeted anyone outside of Africa, Trump is stating that there is they could imminently attack the U.S., and so we have to proactively get into the Sahel. And we saw they bombed Nigeria. Recently bombed Nigeria again with drones. They're about to strike Mali. They're leading up to strikes to striking Burkina Faso. So we must understand what is coming. The U.S. intends to wage this military warfare against the Sahel. It has stated that that's what it plans to do. And it has set about a budget to do so in 2027. And so I think, to me, this is all in line with this larger U.S. policy around Africa of using military intervention and control in order to control land, resources, and labor.
Wow. The U.S. never ceases to amaze me. It's the same thing over and over again. They're always behind something in Africa. They're always behind something bad in Africa. Now, when it comes to AFRICOM, there's a white general now, Douglas Anderson, but before him, he was a black general, Langley. And I believe that Langley was fired by Trump because I think that you remember there were talks about killing Ibrahim Traore, and I truly believe they wanted to finish Ibrahim Traore but I think that he botched the mission to a point where it created a public outcry, continental-wise, to a point where he couldn't execute the mission the way they wanted to execute it. And I believe he was fired. They put this general, this white general now, I believe, to complete the mission. I said it from the minute that general was put in. I said that this guy is going to do what Langley couldn't do. And it seems like it's finally going to be the case because like the way you said, the budgets have shot up and they're more aggressive than the way they've been over the years. It's the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have to understand, the black or white general aside, this is the same enemy. Maybe Langley had had disagreements with Trump on the scale of the aggression that they were going to pursue in this, that they are intending to pursue in the Sahel. But Langley was using the very much the same rhetoric that there are that in order to fight any imminent threats of terrorism against the U.S., that the U.S. would need to go into the Sahel, would need to strike the Sahel, and I think that that now, with all of Trump's recent statements, with the recent Pentagon budgets, we understand a very clear picture that they are they're not only intending to do this, but intending to do this with an extreme amount of force. Maybe I think there were small disagreements, but yeah, I think it paints a very, very clear picture about what the U.S. is going to do in the coming year.
I think I should have asked this first. What's the end goal of the U.S.? What are they getting in return when they make the matters worse in Sudan?
I mean, there are many. So when we talk about, for example, in Sudan, what the U.S. is getting, we can directly point to the military companies that have, again, it's not only billions, it is trillions of dollars in profits that they have gotten from this genocide in Sudan since 2023. So that these companies that are profiting, these military companies that are profiting, but also we have to understand, like, indirect supply chain. When there is control of an African region by a client state, these resources that are coming out, that are being stolen out of this African country, are then going into circulation in this larger supply chain, making resources much more cheap to purchase. That's what we're seeing with Congo as well, is that all of our iPhones, all of these huge profits that U.S. companies are making come from the backs of Congolese people, come from the backs of Sudanese people, come from the destruction of Sudanese and Congolese land, and so there are all of these real profitable reasons. But I think one reason that I think is really overlooked is, I mean, for example, the U.S. is why the U.S. would be targeting the Sahel is because the Sahel is resisting imperial control. And this is a threat to U.S., the main empire, the U.S. main hegemony of the current world order, the U.S. And so this obviously they would they seek to annihilate any such resistance, and ensure that African countries remain remain under imperial control, do not have sovereignty. This is that of course would be in direct U.S. interest. I would also point out, because whenever I point out Sudan from the lens of U.S. interest, One thing that is unavoidable to bring up is Sudan's historic resistance and stance with Palestinian liberation. So the U.S. has very clear intention of ensuring that there's no resistance to its policy in the Middle East, and Sudan has historically has provided military support of Palestinian liberation, and has the Sudan historically bombed Israel, and has provided the first international forum for Palestinian liberation. This was really it was called the Three No's conference in Khartoum, and so I think Sudan poses with a sovereign Sudan, it poses a great risk to U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, and it also poses a risk to U.S. policy throughout the African region. And I think one thing that is also unavoidable to point out is all of these, many of these countries that are being struck are Muslim majority countries, and there's this, and even within the strikes on Nigeria, Trump utilized this rhetoric of protecting Christian Nigerians from Muslim groups and from Muslims. There's this rising tide of this anti-Muslim rhetoric, which is not only affects Middle Eastern countries, but also African Muslim majority countries. And so that's just one justification that the U.S. is using to impose control over African countries, that there's this impending threat of Islam and of Muslim people against the U.S.
Yeah. I mean, Islamophobia has always been there. But the thing is that it's just funny how the American white supremacy power structure is always like, you can find their fingerprints in every single African conflict and war that is happening right now. Haiti, you can see their footprints. Sudan now, you can see their footprints. Congo, you can see their footprints. The terrorism in the Sahel, you can see their footprints. Jesus Christ. Like, what do you think is wrong with I mean, I know the answer, but for people who don't know, what do you think is really going to help us, the global African race, to really decolonize? I like the name of your movement, because that's my mantra. That's my mantra. Decolonize Sudan. My mantra is decolonize Africa and decolonizing African mind. So how do we decolonize Africa to a point where we are Western free, we are also Eastern free, we are just for ourselves and ourselves only?
Yeah, I mean, it's African control of African resources, Africa for Africans. That's always and that is the threat that Traore, that is the threat that the Alliance of Sahel states presents to the U.S., that Africans can take control of their resources. So this is that's at the center of all of this is African resources. That's what fuels. That's what keeps the world flowing. That's what created the U.S. empire, is African labor. And so to halt the supply of this resource theft would threaten U.S. hegemony. It would threaten this global order where Africa remains subservient to the West. And one thing that I'll point out around Haiti, that it's not only are there U.S. footprints in Haiti, there are U.S. feet in Haiti. There are U.S. troops that are that were deployed as part of the UN peacekeeping mission to stabilize Haiti, and that what that stabilization has looked like is U.S. occupation, a UN facilitated U.S. occupation of Haiti. So I want to be clear to our audiences that UN intervention, calls for UN intervention are tantamount, are the same as calls for Western military intervention. UN peacekeepers are Western military troops. That's what, because the UN doesn't have its own military force. The military forces of the peacekeeping troops of the UN come from the US and the UK. So we must understand that the UN is not the UN is not our friend here. That there's no UN solution to colonial siege, because that's not what the UN was created to address in any way. It was created to affirm colonial control. It came out of the League of Nations, where all of these imperial powers split up Africa and claimed different African regions as their own. This was the where the UN came from. So the UN is not our solution. We are our solution. Only African solutions to African problems. African resistance is the only solution to getting any colonial control out of our countries, and we must understand the attack that we're under. We are in a war. We are in a war for our people, for our land. Whether you are in Sudan or any other part of Africa, we are at war, and the U.S. is at war with us. So we must demand that the U.S. Is out of Africa. We must demand an end to AFRICOM, and we must recognize this moment for what it is, that our people are at war.
Mm-hmm. The only difficult fact and the only sad thing about this is that Africans don't even know we are at war. We are at war, but Africans don't know the fact that we are at war, and they don't know who is behind the war. They don't know who we're even fighting. And that's what I keep on saying every day on this show. We are at war. We are at war, but we don't. But when you try to tell Africans that we are at war with these white supremacy power structures, all they keep on saying is that no, Ruto is the problem. No, Ramaphosa is the problem. No, Museveni. No, all these people. And I'm like, yeah, they are the problem. Our presidents are part of the problems, but the main problem is who controls them, who's puppeteering them. If you can be able to stop them.
These are puppets merely there to distract us.
Yeah, if you cut the puppeteer off, automatically the bad leadership in Africa will end, because we will be able to put the leaders who will be able to be for Africans, by Africans, with Africans. I want to know one thing about the UN, because we haven't talked about the UN. But wait. But before we go to the UN, you said that the US, what the US is getting out of this is this military contractors, siphoning the military contractors making business off of the Sudan war. Is there any way the Sudan is benefiting? Is there any way that the US is benefiting off of the Sudan war? We all know that Sudan has gold, Sudan has oil, Sudan has a lot of gum arabic. Are the resources in Sudan also benefiting, or the US? Is the US doing the good old classic, takeover?
Yeah, so when I mentioned this larger supply chain that the US is profiting off of, then we cannot we cannot that it is able to absolve itself, is able to be to profit off of this supply chain without directly being named as a perpetrator creating this supply chain. We have to talk about this concept called the economy of genocide. This is a term that was coined by the UN Special Rapporteur for Palestine, Francesca Albanese, and to talk about to restructure how we think about genocide as instead of that genocide is fueled by these random forces that are kind of chaotic and evil, and that's how genocide happens. That's not how genocide works. Genocide is a structured, profitable industry that is why the U.S. is so adamant on the continuation of genocide in Palestine. It is about a larger economy that the U.S. is profiting off of. You mentioned gum arabic. That is one of many resources that the U.S. is one of the main exporters of. But there's no gum arabic here. There's no gum arabic in the UAE. How are these two countries exporting so much gum arabic? And gum arabic it is through the theft of Sudanese resources. And gum arabic, to point out, it is one of the most it is in almost all of our products. It is in all sodas. It is in all candies. It is in all processed foods. It is in all of our cosmetic products. So this is one of the most prevalent resources in the world. 99% of gum arabic is produced in Sudan. This is Sudan's major resource. And yet, how are these countries that don't have any gum arabic able to import and export so much of this product without Sudan getting any richer, without any of these, without the Sudanese government nor the people seeing these profits? And that's through the theft that is occurring at enormous rates since the RSF takeover in 2023. There was recently a report that came out. We knew that the gold theft was happening, but this report directly names and has all of the data to show that this is the largest. What the UAE did in Sudan is the largest gold heist in history. In history, there's been no larger gold heist than has happened in Sudan, and the UAE has seen the profits of this. So we have to understand genocide as a profitable industry, as part of what keeps this capitalist system going, as how these wealthy elites are able to stay so wealthy and become wealthier than ever. In history are we seeing more inequality in who is those up top and those below.
Wow! It's insane. The US, it's a good old classic tactic. We must get the resources. They must get something out of this, and it's very sad. It's very sad. Wow, you've really laid down the information that some of us did not know, because we always see the UAE is there, and we've always known that the US is in this war through the UAE, but we didn't know that they're directly also involved, and that's something we've established today. It's but before we close, what do you think about the African leaders who are also aiding the RSF? My question is this: what are they seeing in the RSF? that they're supporting it? Have they given up on SAF? Do they want RSF to take over the country? That's one thing I've always. Or are they benefiting off of this the way America and the UAE are benefiting off of this war? What is going on when it comes to the African involvement in this?
Yeah, I mean, so whenever we talk about, again, the African involvement, when we talk about Ethiopia, when we talk about Chad, we talk about Libya, we need to always understand that their support is coming via the UAE. The UAE has come to them with billions of dollars, either just giving them billions of dollars or making deals via government contracts or investments in businesses in these countries. Many times, businesses of the leadership of these countries. So it's not even the countries that are benefiting; it is the leadership of the countries that are going into these corrupt deals, including the U.S. By the way, the U.S. Trump's family has profited greatly from direct UAE investment ties in UAE investments in Trump's family businesses, and so the leaders are getting direct. They're getting cash in hand. The governments are getting investments and contracts with the UAE. This is what they're getting upfront, and what they understand is that as long as they invest in this vision of a RSF-controlled Sudan, what will happen is that any such RSF-controlled government will be in favor of their policies. For example, Ethiopia is very much invested in the Nile River Dam project that has been fought, that Sudan has fought against for decades now. And now that Sudan is weakened, is destabilized, they've went ahead and moved forward with this dam project, which would deter water resources from upstream sources and greatly benefit Ethiopia's energy economy, which should also benefit the U.S. because the U.S. Has many data centers in Ethiopia. And so there's this, again, it's all part of this economy of genocide. There are immediate profits in being involved in this genocide and allowing this, in being complicit in this happening. And then there are all of these long-term benefits that they see with a destabilized and weakened Sudan.
Wow. As we wind up, Suad, I always watch you online doing the work. I always see you in the protests. I always see you in the interviews, and I see you everywhere, really raising awareness on what's going on in Sudan and fighting for your people. One thing I always ask myself is, what is the greatest challenge that people like you or your team in Decolonize Sudan, or Sudanese people like you fighting for Sudan, what is the greatest challenge you people face? Do you just tell me, because I always see you and I'm like, wow, she's doing it, but what is the challenge that she faces as she's fighting for her people in Sudan?
The narrative of inevitability, that Sudan is inevitable. It's inevitable that Sudan will fall. That it's inevitable that that African that all African countries are destined for being weak states. That African countries are we have no hope in our countries. There's all these problems, and so why are we even? What are we even fighting for? And this narrative is what perpetuates people to not act. It perpetuates. It creates this hopelessness that prevents us from having any type of material, material gains and material wins. Is that if we continue to believe, yeah, Africa is just a it's a hopeless cause, that our African issues are, it's just inevitable that that Africans will fight amongst one another, and that this is going to happen. That's the greatest block to my work. That's coming from other African diaspora, and it's primarily coming from those with power. I was in a talk recently with where I heard some U.S. State Department folks talk about Sudan. Do you want to know how they're talking about Sudan? They're talking about they're talking about how RSF governance is they're talking about it like RSF is already a government force, that the RSF has already taken over, and that they're planning for, okay, now that there's this RSF government, what are our plans to move forward? So there's an inevitability of how of all of this that is being spoken about, not only for our enemies, for our opposition. That's how they're talking about us. That's how they're talking about our country. But also within our own people, we're talking about our country like it's already done for. It's a lost cause, and it's a so-called weak state. It's a failed state, and we have to contend with that. That's the biggest, to me, the biggest hurdle in this work is fighting against that hopelessness, fighting against these narratives of my country, that because it's not inevitable. That to me, I'm a God-fearing woman. I believe that at any moment, Sudan will be free, and that it will, because I believe in a just God. And this is the only way that we can move forward, is if we all believe this and we work towards this. Because, like I said in a previous session, if Sudanese diaspora effectively mobilized in the US, where the weapons are coming from, this could stop. We could stop this. If there was just an ounce of the kind of mobilization that we saw for Palestine within the US for Sudan, if we mobilized and did a concerted campaigns to stop the weapons flow, to stop the US complicity in Sudan, because that is what's at the foundation. That's the only reason this is continuing, is because of US complicity, because of US support, either indirectly or directly. This would stop. This would end if we had this effective mobilization. And the only reason that we don't have this effective mobilization is because of that hopelessness that I mentioned. That there's no way that an arms embargo actually would happen. There's no way that the US is going to do this regardless. There's no way that we can stop it. And if we believe that, then that's what will happen. But if we believe that Sudan will be free and we work towards that, then that's what will happen as well. I think we have the power.
We have the power. We have the power. We have to keep on pushing. We have to keep on pushing. I know there are many people in the comments who ask, what can we do? Many people are watching from Jamaica, from here in Kenya, from anywhere, even US. And they're asking, how can we contribute to peace in Sudan? What do you say about that? Because I know you always advocate for the arms embargo aspect of this. Please explain that, and if there's any other thing that people can contribute to end this brutal genocide that's going on in Sudan? Please tell us.
Yeah, I mean, an arms embargo is specifically. I'm talking about a UAE arms embargo. So the UAE is its proxy militia is doing this genocide, and so isolating the UAE for what it is, stopping weapons flow to the UAE contingent upon its ongoing genocide of Sudanese people, is what an arms embargo, a UAE arms embargo is, and within your respective countries, I would urge you to understand if your government has any complicity in the genocide within Sudan. If your government has hosted RSF officials, is legitimizing the RSF as a governing force. If your government is providing weapons, providing fighters, any type of material support that your country maybe your country's leadership may be complicit in, I would urge you to try to find out about that, and then fight against that within your respective countries. And there are many people that there are those in Kenya that are actively doing this. There's a whole group of Kenyan lawyers that brought a lawsuit in Kenya to bring awareness to and challenge Kenyan leadership's support of the RSF, because the RSF was able to create its governance. It was able to have this convening where it declared itself a government in Kenya. It was only able to do so because the Kenyan leadership facilitated this, and so these Kenyan lawyers rose up to challenge their government's complicity. Those in the EU are also pushing for a UAE arms embargo. Recently, activists in the EU were able to successfully push for an EU resolution that not only named that there's RSF genocide of Sudanese people that's happening, but also that the UAE is the facilitator of this genocide through its provisions of fighters, weapons, and funding to the RSF. So the EU was, people were able to successfully mobilize to not only create awareness of their government's complicity, but effectively challenge this in these international settings. And that's what we need to be doing is first understanding if and how our own governments are complicit in this, and then challenging that, bringing awareness to that, and challenging that wherever and however that we can, through every avenue that we can, and understanding that it's, even if you start something, even if it's just you in your country that's fighting against this will grow into a larger movement, and it will be effective. I saw this directly with the EU. I spoke to activists who it was just a couple of different activists in different countries, and they were operating in this kind of isolated way. And they got together and they started organizing together, and then they started meeting with their EU representatives and talking to them about what's happening, bringing the data to them, which, by the way, our organization provides. We have multiple toolkits that lay out the data for you. So you can present all of this data, which we lay out all of the sources, the laws, and all of the investigations and reports that outline the UAE's role, so that you can present those to very easily to any people with power, with any leverage that they have to be able to expose this and to challenge this. And I saw how that was crazy. I mean, I saw a couple of really dedicated activists for Sudan, and some of them were not even Sudanese, fighting so hard for this EU, the challenges to the EU complicity with the UAE. And then this happened, and then now a EU resolution has happened. So it's our power. The power is with us. It is with us, and we understand that if we start something, that people are attracted to the truth, and people are attracted to justice. Those around us will come with us, and we can create larger movements, and those movements will result in material gain as long as we understand that we will win, that there will be a free Sudan, there will be a free Congo, there will be a free and sovereign Africa. As long as we understand that and work towards that, that is, again, what will happen.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that. And you know, the war started in 2023, and the president at that time was Joe Biden, a Democrat. Now it's a Republican. So it just goes to show you that it doesn't matter. And I tell black people this who are in America, and even black people here, because black people love Democrats here. I tell them it doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican. At the end of the day, they have the same agenda when it comes to Africa. They have the same agenda when it comes to black people. That is keep them under always. Case study, Sudan. So thank you so much, Suad, for coming. Please give your final word before we end this. Please keep on doing what you're doing. Before you give your final word, Suad, what's going on in Kenya right now is fixing to be like your country, Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
The political temperatures are rising up, and you know what's happening? The government is hiring goons to to interrupt rallies, to interrupt protests. And the goons started with stones. Now they are, and then they started with stones. Then they graduated from stones to big, thick sticks, and then now we just saw recently that now they're starting to have guns. This is how militias grow. This is how militias grow. That's how it started in Haiti. Even in Sudan, RSF, the Janjaweed was being used by Bashir. It is very. I tell Kenyans this. It is very dangerous, and I'll be on a big Kenyan podcast on Wednesday, and I'll tell them this. It is very dangerous for governments to use outside forces like militias, like gangs, to do their dirty work, because those militias end up being something that will be even more powerful or equal to the police or the army. Look at what's going on in Haiti. Look at what's going on in Sudan. So
and these militias will result in the ruin of the country, because these are not because militias first and foremost are driven by profit. They are a corporation. It's a corporate entity that only seeks profit. And so of all I think of all military threats, militias pose the largest threat to African countries, precisely because they're driven by profit, and whoever is the highest bidder that seeks to influence the policy of that country can just funnel resources into that militia, and whatever empire, whatever entity supplies this militia, they are able to wipe their hands clean of what happens. They are able to avoid any type of direct links to what's happening. So rather than us saying the UAE is committing genocide in Sudan, we're able to say, oh, the RSF is doing this proxy militia of the UAE. The RSF is doing this. The UAE may be funding them, and the UAE is denying this, but who knows what's happening? It's able to obscure the story and obscure particularly media narrative, so that we're sitting here confused on what to do. Who are our enemies? What is happening? Oh, there's this militia. It may or may not be funded by these sources, and we're rendered incapable, rendered powerless in doing something, because there's all these confusing entities happening. I really do think militias, the rise of private militias it is only going to grow again in the future, and they're able to grow because again states are able to avoid any type of accountability for their actions because they're able to bring in a proxy militia to do their bidding for them. And I'm really appreciate your the way that you connect these issues, because that's something that I really don't see. I see people, talk about Sudan here and there as an isolated issue, but you understand the connections and make the connections for African people in why and how this will affect the entirety of the African continent and African people globally.
Suad, Ahmed Kabalo, Decolonize Sudan, and all these other Sudanese activists and journalists who are out there every day raising awareness about Sudan. They can't be the only people doing this. We need to have more Ahmed Kabalos. We need to have more Suad Abdel Aziz. We need to have more Sudanese activists to really, really, really push for this. Sudan is not far away from Kenya. Before the split of Sudan and South Sudan, Sudan was just our neighbor. So this one is, this one hits home for me because it's not just an African country; it's an African country that is just not far away from Kenya. It's just here. It's just here, and Kenyans are not really caring about it. Africans are not caring about it, and Sudan is the world's worst humanitarian crisis. But they're the same people who advocate for other people. It's insane. So please, Kenyans, please raise awareness on Sudan. And the people outside of Sudan, globally in the African race, please let us keep this Sudan issue as the number one topic of activism because it is the worst humanity. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. I heard some people say it has reached 1 million people dead and millions of people displaced. Whatever the number is, the bloodshed is too much. It's too much. It has to stop. It has to stop. Suad, please give your final word as we wind up.
Yeah, and I mean, I reiterate everything you said and fight privatized violence in your country. Fight the growing trend of and the growing power of militias in our countries. Fight U.S. presence in our countries. Again, fight U.S. presence in our countries. Keep U.S. out of Africa. U.S. hands off Sudan. Please support our work by checking out our resources, by following us, by joining our email list, keeping up with us. All available on our website at decolonizesudan.org. Organize with us. Again, on our website, we have a link for you to be able to join us in our organizing efforts. Wherever you are in the world, you can help us with research. You can help us with writing reports, with organizing from where you are. Please join us, support us, and thank you. Thank you again, Brother Orina. This is, like you said, this independent media source is one of the few that is doing real truth telling about Sudan and about African issues. And so I commend you, my brother, for your work, and I pray that your work is able to grow and for your voice to be heard by many more people, because this you really have had, we don't even understand the impact that your work has had. And so I commend you, and I only pray for this success of your media apparatus, of your show, and for your continued work. I appreciate you.
Wow, thank you. Likewise, likewise. Please go to decolonizesudan.org and join the mailing list. I'll put also your Instagram also there so that people can go follow you and see what's going on. You're very active on Instagram. Also your YouTube as well. I'll just put all your social media platforms. Guys, please support Decolonize Sudan. This is Suad's movement, and she's doing a good job for Sudan. So thank you guys for watching. Please support this channel. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. Please support support Black independent media platforms. We're the last line of defense. The mainstream media has been bought, has always been bought, but I'm not bought, and I'll never be bought. We're the last line of defense. So thank you guys. Thank you. Be blessed. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.